Last week we started the topic on wealth creation and it went really fast. There was so much engagement going on that we decided to extend it to this week. So this is wealth creation 2, and I want to share stories of how nations like China, India, Vietnam, Chile, and America, how they've developed resilient economy and what Africa can learn from it. So one of the things we started talking about last week was that there were several misconceptions about wealth, right? People assume it's easy, people assume it's immediate. So if you've not watched it, I encourage you to watch last week's episode or the recap, right? People think it's easy, that it's immediate. People assume that they really do know how to do it, that if they say they want to create a business, that they really have all the knowledge it takes to be successful. But what I've found is that may not be. Today I want to drill down a little bit more to think about what have society done to create environments that actually allowed as many people as possible within their society to be able to thrive, to be able to grow wealth, enough that the nation itself thrived, right? Because sometimes people say, oh, that's a great nation, right? America is great. But the reality is the story of America, for example, it's about a society that has created policies and put things in place that inspires individuals to go out and create wealth, right? And pass it down to the next generation and keep accumulating. Is that cumulative economic growth that really does allow a nation to be great? So first I'll start with the story of Chile. A few years ago, I was working in corporate America and I started exploring what I could do and, following the trail of money and just trying to understand Africa and economic development and all of that. And one of the people I spoke to was a senior vice president at Walmart. And one of the things he shared with me was that, wow, Toyin, the story you're sharing about your country, your continent, sounds familiar. He asked me, have you heard about Chicago boys? I was like, no. He said, go research, just type Chicago boys. That most students of economists know that story, that in the late 70s, early 80s, Chile was really economically down, and I believe it was under a dictator at that point. But they had this exchange program with the United States where a group of boys, men, were sent to University of Chicago to study under one of the foremost economists of that time. And after their studies, they returned to their nation, and the leader actually placed those boys, they call them boys, but men, in strategic positions within his cabinet. And basically they worked hard to implement and to change policy and to implement everything they learned. Well, fast forward to today, Chile is outperforming a lot of places in the world. They're quiet, but if you look at their trade data, their export data, you've probably eaten bananas from Chile and all of that. So that was the story he shared with me, was just the fact that, you have a nation that something deliberate was done to change the trajectory of the nation. Another story would be of India. India was mainly also colonized, right? One of the things they had to transform was their education system. Late 70s, early 80s again, and these are things you can also research online. They actually took a look at their education system and they scrapped what was handed to them, or what they had adopted, right? And what India was using at that time. And they took a look at their education system and I said, this is not going to get us where we are trying to go. They basically scrapped their education system and they developed a new one. Fast forward to today, because of the work they did 40 years ago, today, when you think about technology, when you think about space innovation, India, when you think about science, India is right there. So basically, it's another story of not assuming that wealth just happens for a nation, or, overnight, a nation would go from 0 to 100 without deliberate systematic changes. China, 40 years ago, what did people think about China? In fact, what people used to say, for example, was that Nigeria, the largest economy in Africa, was actually doing better than China at that point. But today, we all know what they've gone after. One of the things they've gone after is to say, you know what, trade. We want to trade. We have people. We're going to acquire technology. Let us help you with our labor. Let us help you create products. At the very beginning when they started, we all know we used to talk about, quality. There were quality issues, but they didn't stop. They kept improving. They kept perfecting the products coming out of China that today, you think about cars and electronics and innovation that is coming out of that country. It's incredible. Today when we look around the world, we're easy to say, yeah, China, but we forget that just 40 years ago, that wasn't the situation. And one of the things I try to say is that I think it can actually take the continent of Africa a lot less time to arrive where they want to arrive, only if they do everything they need to do, because they are actually more strategically positioned than China was, 40, 30 years ago. Let me move on to the story of Vietnam. One of the things I heard about Vietnam, this is a first-hand story from a leading woman in that region that's actually based there, that was responsible for exports out of Vietnam and Cambodia. And what she told me, because I've had the opportunity to speak to so many leaders around the world about the continent of Africa, about commerce, about trade, about investment, about economic development. And what she told me that, Vietnam had similar issues 15, 20 years ago. Basically, she said, after the war, they had a lot of debt to the old Soviet, and that the government could not pay. And they struck a deal that allowed them to manufacture military uniform to pay off their debts. I'm telling you, I can't make this up. There are incredible stories that, I've heard myself that honestly, you can't just make it up. So basically, they had to start manufacturing thick wool military uniform in order to pay their debts. And for years, that was what they were doing. When they finished paying off their debt, they looked back and realized they had built a textile manufacturing base. And they were like, oh, who else could we make things for? If we've already built this infrastructure, then let's start looking for contracts all over the world of people, of brands, of fashion brands that would need our technical expertise to manufacture products. And that's what they started doing. She was part of transforming that landscape. And she said, basically, that's what they started doing, reaching out to big brands and say, hey, we can make that for you. Bring it. We have the infrastructure. We have the people. We have the expertise. We can actually make this brand probably at a better price for you. And the early brands took a risk. They took a risk and they gave those contracts to Vietnam. And today, we all know there's a lot of outfits and, textile in the fashion space. Vietnam is known very, very well for its textile manufacturing. So that's quite fascinating story. It's one of those stories I've heard. So for me, as I went on my journey of Africa, one thing remained clear. Most people in the business world didn't see Africa through the lens of trade. Ask me why. Honestly, I have no idea. In fact, one of the things I said is when I came to America is when I started seeing, oh, is that Africa? Is that the Africa I just came from? That doesn't share my story. That's not the Africa I know. Wow. This is not corporate Africa of ingenuity, of innovators, of business people, of executives. I grew up upper middle class, and So for me, the image of Africa has really, really impacted how much business the continent is doing with the rest of the world. However, one thing that people do is actually use the African resources, right? From the raw commodities to the oil, to the minerals, to the diamonds, to the people, right? The rest of the world does know how to tap into Africa's resources, but the narrative of the continent has been controlled by external forces, and I think we're now at a time where I'm seeing a lot more African share the true story, share the full story, or the other side of the coin, right? Where you've only seen one side of the story. So that's something that I've seen has impacted Africa negatively, is that the narrative out there doesn't talk about commerce, doesn't talk about trade, doesn't talk about the people, doesn't talk about value creation, doesn't talk about what the continent has to offer the global market. And for me, that has become the foundation for the work that I've been doing, to say, hey, I'm not from the world of charity. I don't know that world, but I'm from the world of business, and I know a little bit about global transactions at scale. I've seen what Latin America has done and keeps doing. I've seen China, I've seen India, and I'm saying, why not Africa? Like, what's the gap? And for me, following that money trail has been an adventure. And what I realized is that a lot of stakeholders say they want the same thing, but how they are going about it may not be fully giving them everything they're desiring. So basically, wealth creation, what are the things the continent can learn? And not, when I say the continent, I also mean the people. Africa only goes where the people of Africa and African descent, when you say the diaspora, Africa only goes where those people go. The aspirations of those people is really reflects on the continent, right? The economic growth of nations like Nigeria or Ghana or Rwanda or Egypt really is what tells the story of Africa. So for me, when I say what can Africa do, I'm saying, what can the people start doing? Number one, identify your value proposition, right? When you're trying to shift from the narrative of aid and people helping and people, this expectation that somebody else is going to help, you have to shift from that narrative, because the business community doesn't respond to that conversation. We only respond to what value do you have to offer and what are you asking for in return. So I always tell people in the political space on the continent to say, for example, when you go to Washington, D.C., come with your business executives. Don't go as a political person only, right, to DC and to say, oh, we need aid, okay? People are only going to see you that's all you want, aid, right? But when you go with your business executives and you have the host nation also tag along with their business executives, while the political people are talking about policies and what they can do better, the business people should be talking about trade, like business to business transactions. What can we do? Well, we have telecoms. Well, the African people can respond, yes, mobile phones are really going fast on the continent. And the business person, for example, in America should be saying, hey, I want to invest in that space. And then that business person from Africa should be saying, yes, I can help you make it happen. Do you want to partner? So that's one mistake I see the political elite on the continent do. They travel all over the world, but they travel alone. They don't show the world that they have a high level of caliber businessmen and women. Don't travel alone. Let the world see, the business side of everything of your continent. And that's how little by little you can start increasing business transactions. That's what China has done, right? Every time you see a political person from China, they're not alone. They're coming with an entourage of business executives. Even when Jack Ma visited Africa, I think he came with, 20, 30 billionaires or millionaires like himself, because the business community is always looking for opportunities, right? Trade, investment, not so the politicians. So, that's one. Don't travel alone. Bring your business community, your business executive, and get them exposed to increased trade. The second thing I say is not only going to places like Washington, D.C., which is the political capital, get out of that bubble. Go to California if you're looking for investments in your technology space for your youth. Go to Detroit if you're trying to grow your manufacturing base, your automotive space. Go to Idaho, go to Wisconsin, come to Chicago if you really want trade, because that's where the business executives happen. That's where trade and business happens. That's the second thing I tell people. You can go to Washington for everything you want, but if what you're looking for are business executives that can listen to you, that can initiate transactions with you, you need to start looking at the nation you're targeting for investments or for trade, bilateral trade. You need to start understanding where are the business leaders, right? You need to go in search of them. The third thing I would say that Africa can start learning is you've got to watch the narrative, right? You have to start thinking in terms of value for value. So for example, start saying things like, right, we have the youngest youth workforce. By 2050, our youth workforce would be here. That means we're having more babies. We're going to be the workforce capital for the next phase, right? For the global market. We have the infrastructure to help support what you're doing. So figure out some type of marketing phrases because that's the truth. In order to attract business engagement, you've got to sell your nation, you've got to sell your region, you've got to sell your community. Otherwise, people have options. People have other places they can go. But if your regions, so for example, for Ghana, tell us what Ghana has to offer, why we should come. And they did that last year beautifully with the year of return, which brought in a lot of tourism. But beyond tourism, tell us what Ghana is looking for and what we can do. Because I have a lot of people, potential investors, asking me, okay, Tony, we've heard you about Africa, we've listened, we're ready to invest. Where do we go? Right? So that's something that the nation should embark on in terms of solid marketing, not this fluff, but a real plan to really go after investments. One thing I would also say, right, so that's within the political elite. Now to shift within the business community on the continent, what I would encourage them to do is to not just look local, think regional, and think global. I know a lot of executives on the continent, they are super busy winning in their local market and they're doing well. I mean, pre-COVID, right? They're doing well. They know the market. They understand the demands of the people. But with the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, with global markets shifting, with supply chain shifts happening, I want to start hearing more of the business executives, business leaders, the business community on the continent. I would like to start hearing more from them in terms of inserting themselves within the global narrative, right? So for example, when you reach out to China, it's so easy to transact with business people in China, right? It's almost, there's no friction. If you want to buy from China or do business with China, there's really no friction. It's so easy. They've made it that easy, right? But on the continent, even though geographically Africa is close to the US, there are still communication barriers. So for me, I would say the business community needs to start understanding the language, the global market language, the regional market language, because we're looking for you. There's so many people around the world looking to import, to export, to invest, because they do recognize that by 2050, right, the trajectory of economic growth on the continent, that Africa is where they need to be, right? By 2050, the continent is going to double in number from 1 billion people to 2.2 billion people. They know that the data says it all, right? There's growth in urbanization, right? People are moving from rural areas into cities. There's density there. When you think about real estate, there's shortage of affordable housing. That's an investment space people are moving into. So I would just say the business community on the continent should get ready, should start preparing, should start connecting, and to make themselves more visible on the global market. So those are some things I wanted to share today in terms of wealth creation, right? It all begins with creating a society that allows individuals to come together, to work together, to figure it out, to build businesses, and to helping them to scale, supporting them with policies, with financial, when I say financial, like being able to loan, like investments, instruments, things like that can help them thrive. And I've seen places all over the world that has done it well, and they're still improving. And even with COVID-19, I think those nations would bounce back faster because they know how to do it. They've done it before, and they're going to apply the same principles. And I want to encourage, the political elites, the business communities, and then also the diaspora, right? The African diaspora. You are the bridge builders. Serve as bridge to connect, the global market with Africa. And just to also let you know that Nazaru as a company is here to support you on your journey of going global, of connecting you to Africa from a commercial standpoint. So please do visit our website, www.nazaru.com. This is something we are passionate about in terms of growing trade, growing investment with the continent of Africa. See you again next week for our 5th edition, where we're bringing you something amazing as well.